Hi, Janice.
Hello, Anthony.
How are you today?
I am great. How are you doing?
Very well. Let's talk about 5 things you need to do as an executor of an estate. This comes from a funeral home in Florida. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, the beavisfh.com site. And again, it's a funeral home down in Florida, but it's a pretty good site, a pretty good summary about what an executor needs to do. What did you think?
Actually, it was great information. And I realized it came from a funeral home as well, which I think is great, the education that they're putting out there. Great article.
Right. Why don't you start off with the first thing you need to do as an executor of an estate?
Okay. Well, they opened it up talking about how becoming an executor can be a little intimidating. Sometimes, most of the time, it's really your first time ever doing it. They talk about a little bit of state law difference on the requirements of who can serve. And so there's definitely some information in here where they're telling you really need to look into it, figure out, the requirements in your area. Well, the first thing, though, you're going to do is to review the will if the person who passed away had a will. You want to thoroughly review it and understand it. What was in it? Were there funeral wishes inside of it? Does the person want to be cremated? Would they like to be laid to rest? What would they like in lieu of flowers? So you would definitely want to get your hands on that right away and look through it and really read it. Which I have a question for you, Anthony. Where's a good place for somebody to keep it?
Cool. Good question. So the way it works in New York, at least, is there's 3 choices for storing your will. First choice is to keep it yourself. That's not a good idea. And the reason that's not a good idea is because, excuse me, if the will is lost while it's in your possession, while the chain of custody is in your possession, then it's presumed that you intentionally destroy it. That's the legal presumption. And we can't use a copy. And you can't, that will is gone, basically.
That's a problem.
So that's option 1 is no good. Option 2 is to leave it with a third party, like usually your attorney has a vault or safe for wills, or, maybe your CPA, your financial advisor. Obviously, I think it makes more sense to just leave it with your attorney. That's the option I generally promote. And attorneys usually do this, without charging you any fee. They just have a vault. I mean, it's just kind of part of the practice of being an estate attorney. And again, the upside is if, for example, the attorney loses it or his office burns to the ground for whatever reason,
right.
He can use a PDF, a copy, and accompany an affidavit, say, hey, this is what happened, my office burned. But since the attorney doesn't have the authority to revoke your will, there's no legal presumption that the will was revoked. Yeah.
Interesting.
And the last option in New York is to store it with the court. I think it costs $25 or $30 here in New York to store it with the court. The upside is that it's a public depository, so everyone knows to look there, right? In terms of your.
Yep.
The downside is it's a quasi-public record, and so far that if you make subsequent changes to your will, you might have to notify the people named in your prior wills. Which I don't know. That's kind of why add that onus to yourself? Yeah.
Right.
But staying on this point about reviewing the will, I would actually rephrase this if I was them to review burial documents. And in some states, in many states, that would be in your will, because this is not about reviewing the will for who gets what, really. What they're saying is review the will for any instructions regarding funeral arrangements, burial, cremation, and that sort of thing. But in many states, there are separate, they don't do that in the will anymore, is the bottom line. They do it in separate estate planning documents that are called the burial instruction or disposition of remains. So I would sort of rephrase it that way.
Okay. So really get your hands on the information and read it before you start making decisions on what to do.
Very good. All right. Number 2 is handle the care of any dependents or pets. I would actually put this before looking for the will, because
it might be important.
If you have an infant in the bassinet,
right,
you need to get there before you start looking for a will.
I'm not
much of a pet guy, but I understand you need to make sure that the animals are fed and cared for. You need to find a new home for them. Side note: we did have a client who passed away with a informal shelter on his property, and we had to, I was the executor on that one, I had to help relocate, I think it was 250 cats. That was interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's, I guess, an extreme example, I think.
But that's very interesting. Wow. How long did that take?
It took a long time. Remember Gina?
Wow.
She handled most of that. Thank you for Gina.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay.
But yeah, dependents. Even if it's not an infant, a junior high schooler or even a toddler, you need to get those kids into the hands of the right guardians ASAP. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's, I think, the first thing you should do.
And that's actually a huge topic. We'll record separately just dealing with that. But that's a very important issue, obviously.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Would you take number 3, Janice?
Yes, finding important documents. We touched about this a little in the beginning. We want to find the documents, but in addition to, like you said, the will and the burial instructions, we have to find the personal and financial documents, including birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificate, and or divorce decree. Really any type of financial document that you can think of, you might need. So you have to find all that. And what I found interesting when reading this one, to prepare for us talking, as I thought, oh boy, I really need to get my act together and put all this in one place, because if an executor goes to look for this, they're going to be sifting through quite a bit of information. So on the flip side of the executor, it may not be a bad idea to have it organized in advance.
So, Janice, addressing your personal comment.
Yep.
My experience, again, I've been executor, I think, over 200, maybe 300 times at this point.
Yes.
It's never going to be organized enough. So my advice is don't spend your life trying to organize for your distant future death. Just live your life and be reasonably organized and have a good executor figure it out. Because I have had cases where the person who passed away had like stickied all their property, color coded, like they basically tagged their property for an estate sale before they passed away, and it had binders tabbed. I mean, that stuff those were super organized. I will give them that, but the amount of time they must have spent doing that, I mean, it's probably outweighed, in my opinion, the value of living your life.
Right. I'm thinking maybe like a 10-minute cleanup job in my my binder over there, just so it's kind of maybe all in the same spot. Maybe 5-10 minutes, but that's about it. That's kind of what I'm thinking for preparing and planning.
Yeah, but to summarize what the point here, find important documents. The executor needs to be able to find anything related to what you owned, anything related to what you owe, and anything related to taxes, right? And then anything else ancillary, like legal documents, trusts, wills, divorce decrees, as mentioned. Everything else can be pulled from public record or as needed.
Absolutely.
Cool. Would you take number 4, Janice?
Yes. So check on funeral and burial arrangements or cremation. We talked about this in the beginning. Some people do leave their specific burial instructions. The article gives different scenarios, whereas they have already left all of their wishes, maybe even prepaid for their funeral. So that information will be there. However, some people don't. If that's the case, talk to the family. Maybe if you're not a family member as an executor, talk to their family. Maybe the deceased has left information and said to somebody, I would prefer this to happen at my funeral or to be cremated. They just talking to them. And then if no arrangements have been made, you just want to really look. Let's see here. It says if no arrangements have been made in advance, talk to the funeral home and cremation services and see how it's going to be paid for. So seems like there's a lot inside of this one, but really start with what were their wishes? Did they write them down? And go with that.
Cool. You covered that very well, Janice. So I'm just going to add some info based on experience. For anyone who's wondering how much should a funeral cost, so be aware that you are in a grieving period and there are some businesses that might take advantage. I don't know how to put that. So let me give you some ranges here. I have done cremations and simple funerals that in total cost, I think, $500. Okay. And I have seen funerals that have cost over $50,000. Right. In New York City, in the 5 boroughs, the typical funeral cost will be in the range of about $10,000. And that's split between actually handling the bodily remains, casket and embalming and whatnot, and catering and whatnot for the service. But if you do a intimate service at home and you do what's called a direct cremation, which is, everything handled legitimately according to mental hygiene and, health laws, but you're just cremating the remains and putting them in a simple container, right? It can literally be less than $1,000. So,
wow.
In case anyone needs to know these things and does, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's not something that's talked about, right? Price shopping funerals. So I'm just trying to share that information.
To have the information just in the back of your head, just as I heard once.
Mm-hmm. All right. The final item of 5 things you need to do as an executor of the estate is 5, pay expenses, debts, and notify creditors. And yes, this is sort of the second leg of your duties as an executor. Your first leg is to collect all the assets, right? Find the bank accounts, sell the real estate, whatnot, get the car. And this leg is making sure you identify all the debts, credit cards, I guess mortgage, what have you, as well as taxes. That's the big one. Uncle Sam is front of the line.
Yes, taxes, very important.
Do you have anything to add on that last one, Janice?
I don't. If with anything, I would say, speak to the attorney that's also involved. If you have any questions on how to handle something or pay something, you can definitely talk to them and get the correct way, to do it if you have any questions. But, I always say, just go with the professional, talk to the professional, get some help if you need.
Right. That's absolutely true. There's a lot of folks a lot of creditors will come after the families kind of aggressively, and there are ways to staunch that and to put them in their place with professional advice. Okay, that's it. Okay, thanks again to the Bevis Funeral Home for this great article for us to talk about, and hope you found it helpful. Talk to you again next time. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you. Talk soon.